Look, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I think we've been lied to. We've been told that a blessed life is a safe life. We've been told that if we're comfortable and our routines are stable, then we must be right where we're supposed to be. But honestly, what if the peace you feel in your comfort zone right now is actually a spiritual prison? I look around at the world in 2026, and it's like we've optimized our lives so much that we've accidentally removed the need for God. We have algorithms to tell us what to buy, where to go, and who to talk to. We've built these safe harbors out of our biological craving for certainty. Our brains are hardwired for this, you know? They want us to stay in the cave because the cave is safe. But your spirit isn't biological. It's divine. And your spirit is suffocating in that cave. We mistake calculated safety for righteousness. But I'm starting to realize that true expansion only begins where your control ends. Think about that for a second. If you have everything under control, if you know exactly how next week is going to play out, then you aren't actually walking in faith. You're just following a spreadsheet. Your obsession with safety is the very thing keeping you from the divine. While you cling to this fragile comfort, your spirit is stagnating in shallow waters. Stagnation is a quiet killer. It doesn't show up with a loud warning. It shows up as a slow dimming of the light in your eyes. It's that feeling of being fine while you're secretly dying of boredom. To find God, you have to do the thing your ego is terrified of. You have to dismantle those defenses and plunge into the unknown, because God isn't a property manager trying to keep your life tidy. He's a pioneer. And he's already out there, past the shoreline, waiting for you to join him in the deep. Is the safety really worth the cost of your soul? I'm talking about that split second where you stop negotiating with God, and you finally commit to the risk. Here's the part no one tells you. The fear doesn't go away. You've probably been waiting for the peace that passes understanding to show up before you move. You've been waiting to feel brave. But I've realized that courage isn't a feeling you have before the leap. It's a power that meets you while you're in the air. The moment you commit to the risk, there is an immediate, massive shift in the atmosphere of your life. It's like the static of your daily routine finally clears out. Suddenly, your senses are sharp. You start to notice things you were too comfortable to see before. You begin to realize that what you called anxiety was actually just your soul waking up from a long, deep sleep. This is what I call true spiritual expansion. And here's the cold truth. It is only accessible through lived experience. We try to simulate everything. We watch videos of people traveling instead of going. We follow faith influences instead of practicing faith. We've become a generation that knows the theory of God inside and out. But we've never actually felt the salt spray of the deep water on our faces. Think about a map. You can study a map of the mountains for 10 years. You can memorize every trail, every peak, every dangerous cliff. But you don't know the mountain until your lungs are burning in the thin air and your boots are sliding on the gravel. God is the mountain. And most of us are just standing in the parking lot, looking at the map and wondering why we don't feel transformed. Transformation requires the raw peril of uncertainty. Why? Because uncertainty is the only place where your ego finally loses its grip. As long as you're in control, your ego is the god of your life. But when you plunge into the abyss, when you take a risk so big that you can't save yourself, you finally create a vacuum that only the divine can fill. That is where you encounter a power that is real, not theological power, not Sunday morning power, but a power that sustains you when you should have broken. So, here is the invitation. Trade the shoreline. The known is a beautiful place, but nothing grows there anymore. It's been farmed to death. It's dry. Trade your predictable life for the depth of the divine infinite. It's going to look like a mistake to the people still standing on the sand. They're going to tell you you're being reckless. They're going to ask you for your 5-year plan. But you don't need a plan. You just need the leap. Because on the other side of that risk isn't just success or failure. On the other side of that risk is a version of you that actually knows God, not by name, but by heart. Are you ready to stop staring at the map? We've spent a lot of time talking about the beauty of the leap. But we have to talk about the part that actually keeps you awake at night. The question that stops most of us in our tracks before we even lace up our boots. What if you take the leap and you actually fall? I'm not going to sit here and give you some toxic positivity speech. I'm not going to tell you that if you have enough faith, you'll always land on your feet and walk away with $1 million. Sometimes, you take the risk and the business fails. You move across the country and it doesn't work out. You open your heart and it gets broken into 1,000 pieces. In 2026, we are terrified of that. We live in a world where every failure is public. We feel like if we don't have a success story to post about, then we've somehow missed God. But here is the most radical, uncomfortable truth I can give you. God is often more present in the crash than he is in the win. We have this idea that a closed door or a setback is a sign to retreat. But what if the failure is actually the very tool God is using to dismantle the parts of your ego that were keeping him out? Think about a seed. A seed has to be completely buried in the dark. It has to literally crack open and fall apart before it can become something new. To the seed, that cracking feels like the end of the world. It feels like a failure. But to the divine, that's the only way the tree can grow. We've been conditioned to think that God only lives in the miraculous success. But I've found him in the mess. I've found him in the silence after a dream dies. I've found him in the moment where I realized I couldn't fix it on my own. That is the raw peril of uncertainty. It's not just the peril of failing. It's the peril of being changed. When you take a risk and it fails, you are stripped of your self-reliance. You lose your calculators and your spreadsheets. And in that nakedness, you finally see him for who he really is. Not as a business partner who guarantees success, but as a father who holds you in the dark. If you are too afraid of the crash, you are too afraid of the intimacy that only happens in the recovery. Don't mistake a failed outcome for a failed faith. If you took the leap because you felt the pull of the divine, then the outcome is actually secondary. The encounter was the point. You are closer to God in a failed venture that required faith than you ever were in a successful life that required none. So stop negotiating with the possibility of falling. Even if you fall, even if it hurts, even if the world calls you a fool, you will be falling into hands that are much stronger than your own. Is your ego really more valuable than that kind of intimacy? I know what you might be thinking. How do I know? How do I actually know if this risk is an invitation from God? Or if I'm just being reckless? That's the question that keeps us paralyzed, isn't it? We want a guarantee before we move. But if I've learned anything in 2026, it's that God rarely gives us a green light that we can see from the comfort of our couch. Usually, he gives us a fire in our bones. A God risk isn't about being loud or showing off. Sometimes the biggest risk you'll ever take is a quiet one. It's the risk of being misunderstood. It's the risk of walking away from a good thing to make room for the right thing. Here is how you tell the difference. A reckless gamble is driven by ego. It's about wanting to be something. But a faithful risk? A faithful risk is driven by a calling. It's about wanting to do what you were made for. Think about the cost for a second. We always calculate the cost of moving. We calculate the money we might lose, the time we might waste, the reputation we might damage. But when was the last time you calculated the cost of staying still? There is a massive, hidden price tag on your comfort. Every time you say no to that pull toward the deep water, a little piece of your heart hardens. You become a little more cynical, a little more safe. And before you know it, you've spent 20 years building a life that looks perfect on social media, but feels like an empty shell on the inside. That is the true, raw peril, not the risk of failing, but the risk of never truly being alive. I've sat with people at the very end of their lives, and let me tell you, they never, ever regret the times they took a leap and missed. They don't talk about the businesses that went under or the moves that didn't work out. They talk about the what-ifs. They talk about the doors they were too afraid to walk through. They talk about the version of themselves that stayed on the shoreline because it was rational. God is found in the risks because God is the God of the living. And living isn't a state of being. It's a verb. It's an action. It's a constant movement from the known into the infinite. If you want to feel His presence, if you want to see His power, you have to go where the power is needed, and it's not needed in your comfort zone. It's needed in the abyss. It's needed in the uncertainty. It's needed in that terrifying space where your own strength ends. So, stop asking for a map. Stop waiting for the perfect time. Look at that thing you're afraid of. That's not a wall. That's a doorway. And the divine is standing on the other side, just waiting for you to turn the handle. Are you going to keep Him waiting? If you've been listening to this and your heart is beating a little faster, if you have that one thing in your mind that you've been trying to push away, I want you to look at it for what it really is. It's not just a risk. It's an invitation to a resurrection. But here's the thing about resurrection. Something has to die first. And usually, what needs to die is our need for control, our need to be right, our need to have every single what-if answered before we take a step. We serve a God of the new thing. And you cannot find the new while you are clinging to the old. I want to invite you to make the trade. Trade the shoreline of the known for the depth of the divine infinite. The shoreline is crowded. It's full of people who are safe but bored. People who are secure but stagnant. People who spend their lives talking about the ocean but are too terrified to ever get their feet wet. Don't be one of them. The deep water is where the wonders are. The deep water is where the miracles happen, not because the water is magic, but because the water is where you finally run out of yourself. And when you run out of you finally have room for Him. Choose the risk. Choose the I don't know. Choose the version of your life that requires God to show up. Because I promise you, when you finally let go of that rope, when you finally step off that ledge, you aren't going to fall into a void. You are going to fall into a purpose. You are going to find a presence that you never could have found in your safe harbor. Stop waiting to be ready. Readiness is a myth. There is only the call and the step. Take the leap. Dismantle the walls. Plunge in. We've talked a lot about the leap. We've talked about the abyss, the risk, and the divine infinite. But the leap isn't always a massive, dramatic event that everyone can see. Sometimes, the leap is just a quiet decision you make in the dark. It's the moment you stop arguing with your intuition. It's the second you finally stop trying to safety-proof your destiny. The world is going to be loud the second this video ends. Your phone is going to buzz. Your rational mind is going to start listing all the reasons why you should stay exactly where you are. It's going to tell you that safe is better than real. But you know better now. You know that the safe harbor was never meant to be your home. You were built for the deep water. You were engineered for the uncertainty. So, don't just listen to this. Don't just agree with the philosophy and then go back to your routine. Take one step. Just one. Dismantle one brick of that fortress you've built around yourself. Reach out to that person. Start that thing you were told was unrealistic. Say the prayer you've been too scared to say. The abyss isn't empty. It's full of the one thing you've been searching for your entire life. It's full of him. You've spent enough time standing on the edge, looking at the water. The trade is ready. Your ego, for his infinite. Your control, for his presence. The shoreline is behind you. The deep is ahead. Go. Amen. And if you want to keep exploring the deep water with me, hit the subscribe button and turn on the notifications. In a world full of noise, it helps us find each other. Give the video a like if it helped you find even a little bit of clarity. Thank you for being here.